Hello, I'm Chris Solo, and welcome to the Fabled42, where we build community through friendship, gaming, and chaos. I have a lot of really awesome friends here today, from Game to Grow and Wounded Warrior Project, and Fabled42. But before we get started with today's panel, we're going to dive into some really quick announcements. Big shout out to our longtime sponsors, Griffin Co. Anything that's 3D printed, we do use Griffin Co. The video and audio displays, player indicators, digital dice, and zoom features for our battle maps is all brought to you by Vorpal Board. And you can get all your tabletop needs at Tabletop Game and Hobby. We also are promoting Wounded Warrior Project. They are our main charity sponsor. We are doing a big 24-hour dungeon crawl on 9/11. So check that link down below to get some more information about that, where you can donate to the Wounded Warrior Project and give some of these players some really cool buffs and things, but we'll have more details about that later in the month. Let's do some awesome introductions. Lindsay, we'll start with you, go across, and then go down.
Hey, yeah. Hey guys, I'm Lindsay Rousseau. I'm a producer here at Fabled42. I'm also an Army Iraq War combat veteran. I served with the 101st Airborne Division as a combat photographer and public affairs sergeant, and I am very excited to be here. So yeah, and we've got tons of air assault, and we've got so much programming going on for GenCon. So thank you for tuning into this panel, and make sure you check out our full schedule on our social media.
I'm Jared Kilmer. I'm a clinical psychologist with Game to Grow and therapeutic game master. I have been running therapeutic RPGs in private practice with Game to Grow and in the VA system for the last 4 years.
My name is Elizabeth Kilmer. I'm also with Game to Grow. I'm the newly minted Director of Education and Training. I will be officially a clinical psychologist in about 8 days when the ink on that paper dries. Thanks so much, y'all. And I have also been running therapeutic tabletop role-playing games. I've run games with kids, adolescents, and adults, primarily focused on trauma, anxiety, depression, and I'm excited to be here.
My name is Adam Davis. I'm a founder and executive director of Game to Grow. I have a master's degree in education with a specialization in drama therapy, and I've been a professional therapeutic game master for almost 10 years now. Game to Grow is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in the greater Seattle area. We run therapeutic groups for kids, teens, adults, emerging adults, and soon to be adults. And most of what we're most well known for is our therapeutic groups using Dungeons and Dragons. We're now serving nationwide thanks to the advent of the internet, and we have people from all over the world coming now to therapeutic Dungeons and Dragons groups. You can learn more about that at gametogrow.org.
Awesome. I feel really nervous about going last. You guys did a great job. So my name is Matt. I'm a Army veteran, combat engineer. I work for Wounded Warrior Project, and I am the live streaming and gaming specialist. Wounded Warrior Project serves post 9/11 veterans that have incurred an injury, illness, or wound while in service.
Okay. And all of you do know me as Chris Solo. I am the founder of the Fabled42 network here, DM for the Realms of Ugador, which our season finale is on Wednesday. Plug. But I am somewhat moderating this panel. However, I'm here to really just listen from Matt from Wounded Warrior Project and you guys from Game to Grow. And I will be moderating and watching the Twitch chat. So anybody who has any questions or anything for our panelists here, please post that in the chat, tag Fabled42, and I will field those questions to our panel. But let's start this off with Game to Grow. Can you guys just talk about, like, how did you get started? You know, what's your driving force for this program, and you know, how long you guys been doing it and all that?
So Game to Grow has existed since 2017. I mentioned earlier that I've been doing this for a lot longer than that. It sort of happened by accident. It was one of those accidental discoveries. I've been a board gamer, RPG player since middle school, but sort of the pieces sort of fell into place where we realized that the actual power of Dungeons and Dragons. I mentioned earlier that my master's degree was in education with a specialization in drama therapy, and I was a freelance drama teacher for many years, a freelance drama therapist for many years, and then found my way into an after-school program that was using Dungeons and Dragons. And at the time, it was sort of a drop-in program. Kids were not there to get intentional work done. It was more just a place where quirky kids could hang out and play a game. And then I realized as I was studying drama therapy that Dungeons and Dragons is intentional role play. and intentional role play can be used to achieve insight, growth, and change. And then really just took off from there, applying it for mostly social skills programs. A lot of the youth that come to our programs now have some degree of social setback, be it related to a diagnosis or not, of autism, ADHD, anxiety, or depression. But everyone who's in our groups is wanting more social contact, wanting more to feel like their presence matters when in a social group, to have that sort of collective shared history. So building on that, that's not just for kids, and it's not just for kids who need social support. That's really for everyone. So what we're seeing now is that Dungeons and Dragons, or games like it, really provide an opportunity for people to come together, and we're really seeing that's more valuable than ever right now, with all that's going on.
Absolutely. So Jared and I learned about Game to Grow back a little bit before it was Game to Grow. And we went, oh my gosh, this is directly applicable to everything that we're doing. So we were in the same graduate program at the time. And a lot of our training is in trauma and substance abuse, and then cognitive behavioral therapies like acceptance and commitment. And we went, okay, so we can take Dungeons and Dragons or another tabletop role-playing game and just dump it on top of a lot of these really established, really effective therapeutic interventions that we're doing. The first group that I ran was at a children's advocacy center for girls and teens who'd experienced trauma of some kind. And it was a really amazing way to get them engaged in therapy, to get them engaged with each other, especially when you're dealing with trauma. A lot of the things we see is kind of isolation from other people, issues connecting, issues trusting, issues setting healthy and appropriate boundaries. I think most people in the world have trouble giving and receiving feedback in a really constructive and healthy way. And using games, especially tabletop role-playing games, allow us to get in and work on a lot of these issues in a really implicit and sometimes, not always, but sometimes fun way. Instead of me sitting down and saying, you need to learn about boundaries, we're going to work on that in game through the NPCs that I bring in, through your character development. So it's awesome. And then we went on to run groups in the VA in a couple of different settings, as well as in private practice, before coming up and joining Game to Grow.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And how did you all get connected with Wounded Warrior Project?
How did we get connected with Wounded Warrior? That's a great question.
That's a good one.
I've had a couple of, I was emailing out of the blue. So we've been wanting to work with veterans for a long time as part of the goal of luring Elizabeth and Jared to the Pacific Northwest to join Game to Grow. This is something we've always wanted to do. Most of my experiences with youth, but I have some veterans in my family, and I know it's an important cause, something that's very dear to my heart, not necessarily my training, but very close to my heart. So we've been wanting to do this for a long time. And so I think the first time I met someone from Wounded Warrior Project was a panel at a PAX at some point, and then we finally started having more regular conversations about partnerships much more recently.
Yeah, I would say we got our tickets to PAX and the schedule came out, and I saw this PTSD Dungeons and Dog Tags panel, and that was the first thing I circled and was like, I will be there. And I got a chance to talk with the Game to Grow team after, and I knew right then and there that we needed to bring Dungeons and Dragons somehow to Wounded Warrior Project and veterans, and it's really just blossomed from there.
Yeah, it's been really cool. So we've run groups in the Waco VA, the Dallas VA, up here in Tacoma and American Lake. And then we've consulted and helped start groups at other VAs. And that's awesome. We've seen really great successes across multiple different departments of mental health, which is really cool when you can find a group that not only works in residential, but it works in outpatient, it works in primary care. But it's really cool how flexible this intervention is. And I'm so excited that we get to kind of take it beyond the VA system as well.
Yeah. One impetus for starting it in the VA system that I thought was really important is it's such a monolithic system that sometimes not everyone can be served as best as they could be. There are individuals who have gone through multiple kinds of treatment that just didn't really resonate with them. There are individuals that weren't quite ready for more directive groups, individuals that are burnt out with treatment, and finding a new kind of intervention that was allowing people to engage and grow in a way that was more covert and less burdensome. Like, cognitively and emotionally on the front end was an avenue to a lot of new ways of working with individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so
Right.
important. I mean, all of my healthcare is through the VA system, and I started working with some groups when I was still active duty. And obviously, a big issue with veterans getting treatment for mental health is the stigma over talking about it, over getting treatment. I personally never wanted to do group sessions, and there's been this strong connection between veterans and gameplay. I mean, when you're in the military, video games are how you pass the time. So having a way where people can feel like they're coming together and they're able to dive into things, but they're not necessarily having to say, oh, I'm in group right now, or even feeling pressure to talk about their problems, finding other ways to work through those problems without necessarily having to sit, and talk about it with a therapist. And
it's not immediately tell us all your deepest, darkest secrets and also your feelings in a group of 8 people.
It's fun, like therapy can be stressful. I know I've been in a lot of it. It can be very stressful. So to be able to like, oh, I'm not in therapy, I'm playing a game.
Mm-hmm. And these games are fantastic team building exercises that group therapy would not really engage in as frequently or directly.
Yeah, so we use a lot of, again, kind of established therapeutic techniques, but D&D can be this great like glue, as well as this like nice entrance into it. And we'll have people in our groups. I've had people in my groups who've been playing D&D since way before I was born. I have people in my groups who have never touched any kind of fantasy or gaming anything. And so you can have this really, really wide range, but it's awesome to get people in a group and you're starting to work with people, especially if you have a hard time trusting people or you haven't felt like you were part of a team since you were separated from the military. Being part of a group like this can be incredibly meaningful. And in a traditional therapy group, I would learn about you over time, right? You'd share stuff, I'd share stuff. You didn't go tell everybody, so like maybe I can trust you more now. But with D&D, I get a better understanding of like really feeling like you have my back, really understanding what's going to happen if somebody attacks us, or if you have the option to kill somebody or not, what are you going to do, right? And a lot of that really directly translates to kind of real world situation. So like I had a veteran recently in a group, and he'd been in the group for a while, and he came to group one day and he said, you know what, I wasn't gonna come today because I have people working on my house, and they're like, I never, like, they're not inside my house, they're on my roof and stuff, but he's like, I never would have left people alone at my house, but this group has like made me kind of practice trust and made me kind of practice and learn that trust isn't just all or nothing, and that maybe I can think about it. He was like, and honestly, I was super motivated to come to this group because I didn't want y'all to have to keep going without me. So I was kind of in this hard place, and I decided to show up. And he came back the next week and he was like, they didn't steal anything from me. That's, it was fine.
That you know of. No. It's D&D is an interesting thing, and we were talking about this a little bit offline, whether it's military PTSD or it's trauma based from something else, but we have different things that happen to us throughout our lives. We put up these defenses and we put up these barriers, and it's a beautiful thing. It doesn't matter what your background is. We all have these crazy defenses and all these barriers, right? 30 minutes into a D&D session, you forget about your barriers. It's a weird thing, but you watch it, all of a sudden people who don't want to talk, they don't want to role play, they don't want to interact, they're all these uncomfortable things. Once they get into it, they're like, oh, this is a story. And then they forget about the barriers, and all of a sudden they're starting to have all these beautiful bridges that are being built, and like it's just a wild thing to watch that just happen. You're like, as a DM, I'm just sitting here like, this is nice.
And then somehow, paradoxically, the opposite is also true, where like by engaging in the game, you can almost immediately start gaining insights into those barriers that you're living with on a daily basis. The very first time I ever ran a group for veterans in the VA system, I was in a residential PTSD treatment program. And the first session, I just drew up a big tavern, and I described what everyone was doing inside that tavern and where people were placed, and I put all the tables there, and I just asked the players to put their mini like somewhere on that map and tell me what they were engaged in, and they all did that. And the final veteran put his piece down, let me know what he was doing, and he leaned back and he went, oh crap, all 8 of us have our back to the wall and we're just like hyper vigilant for the whole room, and like we do this every day, but somehow seeing this laid out like this is very telling.
Yeah.
You also get more, you can slow down and speed stuff up. You can change around the consequences, right? Like if I'm working with someone in real life and we're doing like exposure therapy and I tell them to like go to Walmart or something, right? Like I don't actually have a lot of control over that situation. It's still really valuable and you should absolutely engage in exposure therapy. But it's when I'm working on it in D&D, like I can if you're super impulsive and you run through something without checking and all your teammates are yelling at you not to do it, I can have the whole wall collapse on you and your character could be dead. Right? Like that's going to have a huge emotional impact.
Yeah.
But it has no real world consequences, right? Like I'm not actually killing someone. And so it gives us more space to kind of talk about what's happening and talk about what the consequences are, right? Oftentimes when we are experiencing any kind of mental health difficulty, especially around things like trauma or depression, and we tend to isolate, we tend to like, I don't want to go around crowds. I don't want to go out shopping. I don't want to go to church anymore. You're doing these things to manage your symptoms, but they may have a huge impact on your quality of life. They may have a huge impact on your relationships, your ability to engage in valued work that you care about. And so being able to play with some of that stuff in a kind of fantasy setting allows us to really look at it, right? We get that kind of hindsight is 2020, and we're separating it out from some of our feelings, some of the things that are really important to us. We tend to be the most irrational about the things that are the most important.
Yeah. And, you said
D&D,
something. Oh yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I was saying, I think D&D is a natural fit for veterans. And I think one of the most interesting things that I've always thought about D&D is when you build a character, when you play your character, as much as it's your character, you're putting bits and pieces of yourself into that character. Yeah. And I think veterans do that a lot when they build their character. And the choices that they make in the game tend to be very similar to the choices they might make if they themselves were in that situation. So D&D is really a natural fit for veterans, and it's pretty exciting to watch them play.
And us as storytellers, when we're setting the stage, and like I'm not sure, everyone plays D&D differently. Some is more, just rule based and just turn based stuff. And I DM very, very immersed games, and it's not real, but my players will have these emotional feelings the whole week until next episode in their real lives, because an NPC that they met died, or an NPC they met that saved their life, and now they're like, wow, that guy, like we're making these emotional connections. And yes, because everyone's putting themselves into that. And I had mentioned this too off screen, that I'm having my players fight my demons for me. Like they're fighting this one demon that does psychological damage because whatever the things are, and because I felt like I was trapped. I felt like I was suffocated, and I can't fight the demon. It's right there, and I can't do it. But then my friends come and help me do it. And I didn't realize, I told this before, I didn't realize until a year after the campaign started that, wow, that's why I look forward to Wednesday every week, is because my friends are there to help me fight my demons. And it's just this really amazing, powerful thing, this connection that we've built with these pretend things, with minis and all this stuff, but it's still us as human beings. And that's just feels like it's a family, which is what this all feels like.
Yeah, you're kind of also... Oh, sorry, Lindsay, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, there's also obviously the creativity and the imagination aspect of it. And, obviously so many studies have shown how impactful art therapy and music therapy and anything that taps into those creative synapses in your brain to help you deal and process with things. D&D is very much, and again, we talked about this offline, video games, you're playing a game, it is immersive, but you're not 100% in that world, whereas in D&D, you are using your full imagination to create those characters and create those worlds. And, we have entire games where there's no battles. It's just all role playing, which can be just as exciting as, fighting a beholder or whatever. So I think being able to tap into that creative aspect, which so many of us who do struggle with mental problems sometimes try to suppress, and being able to let that out can be very freeing.
I think it's important to remember that even though D&D and tabletop role-playing games feel like a sort of new phenomenon, it is not. In our actual history as a human species, we have always gathered around and learned collectively through stories. So I think what we're doing is not new. What we're doing is ancestral. It's in our DNA. The written tradition is pretty new in the human history. What we used to do is we used to learn and process through storytelling. That was for millennia. That's how we interacted with each other. Millennia is maybe a bit too long, but you know what I mean. That's how we interacted with each other. It was by gathering around a fire, sitting in a circle, by having an elder of some sort guide us through a story in a ritualized fashion that has a beginning and an end, much like a D&D session has, where we gather around in a circle around a table. We have a game master who's sort of our group elder guiding us through a story that then we process through the narrative, and then we go away and carry that story with us. I think it's important to remember that as new as this is, we're tapping into something that is primordial.
I'm so happy you brought up that specific storytelling perspective, because we are all in a time right now that has never happened, right? We are in a world pandemic where everyone is forced to be isolated, where we can't have that human connection. We can't have that storytelling. We can't go to a friend's house or a game store to sit at a table and play with friends, which is, I talk about Vorpal all the time because I've used all the programs to play D&D, and Vorpal, what we're using right now, is the best one. This is the one that makes us feel like we're actually at the same table. And like I've gotten so many responses from fans that lost their jobs or having financial instabilities or having all these emotional things, and they look forward to what we do to have that connection, because it's not just the five of us here at the table. We have 100 people watching that are at the table too, and we're all here together. We talked about the microtransactions, what have you, where the fans can give players potions and inspiration die, and it makes them feel like they're part of this story. So it's just like the 150 of us are sitting around a campfire telling a story, and he kind of yells out in this big roar, and then someone kicks the fire, and the fire explodes, and everyone's like, woo! And then it's this huge oh god, it's intoxicating. It really is. Someone had a really good question. And yes,
we got
called
two
me
now.
an elder. That's really funny. No, I'm kidding. Does using the different parts of the brain playing D&D help or hinder TBI recovery?
It's a good question. There's, to my knowledge, no research on that. In terms of recovery from TBI, depending on how severe the TBI was and where you are in your recovery, my guess would be that it would help, right? Generally, what we know is continuing to get back to your regular activities, continuing to engage, continuing to use your brain is helpful, as long as you're doing it kind of within what is okay and cleared by your doctor. I would love to see research on that in the future. And the other thing that we know is really important to any kind of recovery, whether that is a medical recovery, whether that is any kind of mental health, whether that is dealing with any kind of loss, is the perception that you have of connectedness and support with other people. If you believe that you have connections with other people that are meaningful and that you have social support, you're going to do better, you're going to live longer, you're going to recover faster. So if D&D is a way that you're able to do that, that can be really helpful. One of the things I love about D&D is how adaptable and accessible it can be, right? So I have run games, therapeutic games, online, in person, over the phone, right? We can change text sizes. We can change whether or not you have lights on. We can change whether or not you have to look at pictures. So it is something that, depending on kind of where you are in your recovery, this is something that should be able to be pretty adaptable for you. But I would love to see research on that.
Another thing about Dungeons and Dragons, you mentioned earlier, Chris, that sometimes you can be role-playing the whole session. And if you are engaged in that sort of spontaneity, that live action creative process, like the improv mind, they've done MRIs while people are like freestyle, doing spoken word poetry and rap and stuff, and have shown just how activated the brain gets when you are doing like free association play. That's just spontaneity, and the spontaneity of activating and rewiring your brain. Once again, there's not research on that impact for that on specifically on TBI, but I think that there's no doubt that D&D is light, which you're in a true state of play. Your brain is entirely activated and
I feel like we should get some machines in my office, because I have TBI, I have Asperger's, and I have PTSD, and I do 100 different characters, and 80% of my campaigns are improv because I just feel like it becomes more organic and natural. Yeah. I would love to see what's going on up here.
Well, and for me, with TBI, bipolar, and PTSD, memory is a big problem I struggle with. I have severe memory issues and just had to redo the battery of TBI testing literally 2 days ago to, all the memory testing. And D&D really does help you stay focused, stay in the moment. You're having to recall, especially with, some of these campaigns, like 2-year campaigns, you're having to recall information, process that information, and, hopefully things are, firing that maybe wouldn't be in other situations.
And
maybe we should contact the IRB. Seems like we have some human subjects for research.
I volunteered.
I volunteer as tribute.
I think that's one of the things, though, is that there isn't a lot of research with Dungeons and Dragons and veterans, and I know that Game to Grow is really starting to get into that, and I would love to see a lot of research done on this because one of the things that Wounded Warrior Project has always done is we search for those alternative therapy for veterans because not everything works for each veteran the same way, right? Not every person is going to respond to in-person therapy. It could be equine therapy, or it could be some other form of alternative therapy. So I do think there would be some interesting statistics and something gathered from research on TBIs and Dungeons and Dragons, but I just don't think that research is there.
It's not. So Jared and I have both done some preliminary research within the VA system around just like general efficacy. And we found some really promising results, but we've got really small sample sizes at this point in time. It's something we're working on continuing to collaborate with. If you happen to be a mental health practitioner at the VA and you want to be involved, let us know. We'd love to collaborate with more people. But it is something that can be challenging to get some of the stuff up and running off the ground.
Yeah.
I have another really good question. Well, we have 2 questions. The first one is someone asked, and I think I'm just going to answer it real quick. Can other tabletop platforms be used for the same results? It doesn't have to be D&D. The answer is yes. Anything that you can connect with other human beings, right? That whether it's role play or it's just people playing games. Is that a correct statement? That anything can be used for healing?
There's nothing sacred about the specific game or the rule system or even that it's a tabletop RPG in specific. It's just that resonates with us as facilitators, and it captures the hearts and minds of the people we engage with, but it can be very flexible in terms of what it looks like.
So some people use other systems, and like Game to Grow, right, is devoted to the use of games of all kinds. We also have groups that utilize Magic and Minecraft. So we started here, and this is where a lot of our work is, and all of my work really is with D&D, but like Jared said, there's nothing sacred.
We do consultations with people around starting their own programs, and people always ask, should I use D&D? My favorite game is Pathfinder, and we always say the game is not the secret. You are the secret. It is the relational space that you're able to cultivate with your players that is going to enable all of the growth and change that you're going to get. Whether you're playing Masks or whatever your game is, you want to play the Cortex system, go for it.
Yeah. You said the magic word. I have over 10,000 hours in Minecraft. I might have a problem. Another good question. From what you know and have studied, do you think we can use RPGs to highlight or change moral foundations or reduce moral disengagement with lasting results?
I don't think I totally understand the question. But I can speak a little bit to talking about like using alignment and allowing characters in my campains. So we have a whole other talk and panel and long-standing debate about the use of evil characters in evil player characters in campaign. And I always allow evil player characters in my campaign, in part because I've never actually met a evil player. I haven't ever met anyone where I'm like, you're evil. Okay, cool. That's what we're dealing with. I have met a whole lot of people who think that they're awful human beings and think that they don't deserve love and think that they're always going to make bad choices and they're always going to hurt people. And I've met people who have made bad choices and have hurt people. And oftentimes when someone comes in and they say, oh, well, my player's just like a horrible, they suck. They're awful. They're definitely evil. We'll say, okay. they'll create their character, and then we'll start the game. And then some kids will be captured by the goblins.
Yeah.
Because goblins are evil, but because that particular group
Of
is up
goblins
to no
suck.
good.
Yeah.
Or captured by bandit, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, all right, do you want to go save it? And the group's always like, especially my veteran group, they're like, obviously we're going to save the kids. And I'm like, yeah, but there's no reward. I'm like, yeah, but kids, we're gonna save the kids, obviously. And so we'll go through and we'll save the kids, and I'll give them other opportunities for kind of pro-social interactions. And then we get to talk about whether or not they chose to take those interactions.
Yeah.
Generally, I found that most people, when you have intentionally chosen to engage in a game of D&D, especially a therapeutic game of D&D, you probably are motivated to get along with people better. Now, you might come into that game and say, I'm just here because my, other case manager hates me and I don't actually like any of you. I think you all suck. But generally once you've gotten the chance to like get past some of those barriers and play together and find out that these people aren't going to desert you and that you're still going to be accepted, you're not playing a character who really fits within that evil alignment anymore.
Yeah.
And so we get to have some really powerful conversations around, so is your character evil or do you just suck at playing them? Like,
or are you misperceiving something?
Yeah, has your
Yeah.
character grown?
Yeah.
Did your character misunderstand? Was this like a whole defense mechanism? Like, what was happening here? And I think that's part of the reason why I really like to use alignment, because I think it can be this really, really powerful thing where we can juxtapose, I see myself as an awful person. Is that the reality? Or have I done some things that I regret and now I'm moving forward with that? And so I think in terms of like, India is a great place to deal with kind of moral issues and to talk about moral injury and to talk about how do we repair stuff. You can do that both with your own characters, but also with NPCs in the game. Maybe an NPC does something that you would have described as unconscionable, and now we have to figure out whether or not you want to kill that NPC, whether or not you want to try and work with them, whether or not you want to try and imprison them. And that's going to really depend on the goals of the group. I wouldn't do that work with my friends because I'm not doing therapy with my friends. I mostly want to play fun games with my friends. So it is important when we're talking about all these topics that if you're choosing to like really get into the depths of like morals, that everybody on the table is on board with that. And we understand kind of where the lines are. But I think it's a really, really powerful tool.
That brings up a really good question actually for me. Like I've been pretty lucky with most of my groups. Everyone was always on the same page. I have my pre-game talks. We're like, okay, these are the things that we're not going to touch. Everybody cool with that?
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Any other surprises? Like, should I not kill a dog because someone's dog just passed away? Like, I want all the things. But I started, especially when COVID hit, I started DMing camps for kids that were like couldn't do LARPing, so they played remote D&D. And I'm not trained. I have 3 kids myself, but I'm not specifically trained to navigate those things. And as a DM, you're put in that role, regardless if you are or not. So my question is I dealt with one kid, and we're all conditioned, right? Especially with video games, we're all conditioned. We go out there and shoot things and kill things and steal things. Like that's what video games are conditioning our youth to do, and if parents aren't navigating that, and that's a whole different topic, we'll talk about that later. But there's one kid who he wanted to be a murder hobo. There was an old man in the woods, and he wanted to kill him. And the other players were like, "No, don't do that." I'm like, you could do whatever you want. Like I was trying to I was never experienced that before, where someone was like so blatantly just wanting to kill something. And that old guy became a wizard because he wasn't a wizard before, but he's sure as shit a wizard now. Go kill the guy. And then we challenged it, we talked about it, we navigated it, and the next time he saw someone, he wasn't so quick to try to kill him. So I was trying to like reprogram his initial things. But that being said, DMs out there. So like what tools could the DM use? Whether I'm DMing for people who actually have PTSD, or I'm just DMing friends, or I'm DMing just random people. Like what are some of the tips and things for us to deal with situations like that, but with adults? Because like children, it's a little easier, I think, than adults to navigate those things.
I think what you're looking at is a couple of different things. Building on the conversation about moral clarity earlier, I think it's an opportunity for values clarification. What are your values right now? Who do you want to be? Is an important question to be asking the players who's playing a character like this, and that is a reflection on us all. Do you want to be the person who hits the guy before asking any questions? What does that mean about your character? What choices does that make? But I think the thing that we could talk at length about session 0 and the kinds of pre-conversations you're referring to, as well as the sort of X card or consent strategies we use in the middle of the game. But one of the things that I have found most useful at my game is that nothing happens in the game until the game master says that it does. So if the player says, I kill that guy in the woods, that doesn't happen until the game master describes what happens when you attempt to do that. You don't get to do anything. You can attempt to do things. Also important to say. And then when you attempt to do that thing, it doesn't actually, nothing plays out until the game master describes and pushes play, basically. So then what I do as a game master is I say, what do you think will happen if you do that? And it's sort of about sequencing events. What are the sort of logical steps that you're expecting to happen? What are some maybe adverse reactions that may happen to that? Do you think the guards will come if they see you randomly attacking people in the street or stealing from shops? Some of that is just logical sequencing, which is a really useful, cognitive skill. But then also I can pause the game and say, so you notice Blackdorf over here is pulling out his dagger to go stab this random person in the woods. What do the rest of your characters think and feel about this? And then we can sort of zoom out a little bit. And then before any of that actually happens, we can decide as a group how the group is going to respond to that. And then I can also say, it's my table and you don't get to randomly kill people. Because I'm the game master, and this is sort of on my no list is random murder. So how do we play this out where your character tries to do this but is restrained by some reason, and then we can sort of build the story together? Because I think returning to the fact that this is a story game makes it also very different than a video game.
Well, I think that also it brings up the issue of consequences, whereas in video games there might not be consequences to your actions. I mean, maybe they are, you respawn or whatever, and that's an option. You can if you die you respawn, but in D&D there are consequences to every action that you take, which might be irreparable.
And I think it puts the responsibility on the DM to sort out reasonable consequences to sort of adjust and mold the behavior of the players over time. We had a character who, it was the coolest idea in the world, because he couldn't do this in real life, to just kick down every door that he came across. And the team loved it. It was very fun to do until contextually it wasn't appropriate anymore, as they're going around to this new town and this shop is all locked up and they really wanted to know what was in it. So they're just kicking the door down, and they explore the shop. A, it was full of pencils. It was not interesting. And B, when they came back out, the townspeople were very upset with them. Yeah. And they kind of learned right there, like, okay, there's a time and a place for this behavior. We need to maybe adjust that. And I have a lot of sympathy for the murder hobo at our table, because I'm an avid gamer. And one of the things that I do in every single game at the very beginning is test the boundaries. What can I do and what can I not do? Where are my verbs limited? And you see that same kind of behavior at a tabletop role-playing game in kids and adults. Just, I don't understand who my GM is yet. What is this game going to feel like?
And I think, Lindsay, that's something that you kind of touched on, right? With video games, if I'm playing a single-player video game, I can spend the first 30 minutes testing boundaries, and I'm not screwing up anybody else's experience. Right. But that might be something that's really different around a tabletop game. If you have one player who keeps just trying to see where the edges of the world are, that's a bunch of time that no one else is really getting to play. And I love, Chris, that you talk so much about what you do in your session 0. And something that I regularly encourage people to do is session 0 doesn't, I think that's sometimes a misleading name for it, because it shouldn't just happen. It's not like we have those conversations and now we're done. Especially if you have new players, or you have players who've kind of gotten bored with D&D, and so now they're trying to do something new and different. You might find that 3 sessions in, or 5 sessions in, or 20 sessions in, your players are trying to play a different game. And so I generally advocate, especially with adults, especially with friends that you're able to kind of have a conversation with, to say, hey, I signed up to play this game. I signed up to play a game with a lot of political intrigue, or I signed up to play a game with a lot of combat. And now it seems like y'all are wanting to play this other game. Is that what's happening? Can we talk about that? Because maybe I am the DM to play that game, but I just needed to know. I need to throw all my puzzles out the window and give you a Tarask next time.
Right.
Or maybe I'm not the best DM for that. I think that sounds like a great game, but
Yeah.
I'm not interested in, or I'm not prepared to run that kind of game.
Yeah, that's definitely a communication thing. Because like we have those conversations in the beginning for the months leading up to a new show. We have the session 0. Well, I have multiple session 0s, so like my players will meet organically in the world. So I had 3 session 0s, and then episode 1 is when all 5 people meet. But usually after every show, we check in, and then sometimes I check in personally, like, hey, do you want to talk about what just happened? And we'll talk through it. And I think just being clear with that, like everybody watches Critical Role and expects their DM to be like Matt Mercer. Some are like that, and some are not. And understanding if that's the table for you, because the DM's not going to change. Like, I'm going to DM the game. This is my game. Like, I'm DMing the game, and you can either be part of it or you cannot be part of it. And like, I do things differently. Like, it's my world, but it's your story. So like, this is your story that you do. So like, if we have that open communication between all the players and the DM, knowing what we can do, what we can't do, we can communicate with one another. It's an open enough communication to where the players will like touch base with each other, like, hey, when you did this really cool, when you did this thing, it didn't really feel good, and they can talk about it too. So the open communication is all the way around. And then the players also understand that certain players will, like, some players like combat, and some players like political intrigue, and some players like shopping. So we all also have to be somewhat adults and understand the differences between that, right? So the differences are, well, today we're shopping so we can deal with these 2 players, and then next show. So as long as there's balance, then everyone feels like they're being fed, and then they can hold space for the other people when they're doing the things that feed them. And like that's the biggest thing when it comes to that communication part of that thing.
Absolutely. And I think talking about preferences, right? It's not like if you want to be a murder hobo in your campaign, that means you're a bad person. That's just the kind of game you want to play right now. And I may or may not want to DM that for you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it does fall on the DM, right? Is there's always consequences to action. Like if you're kicking in so many doors, you might kick in the 5th door, and there's not so nice of a surprise behind door number 5. But it's also a give and take between the player and starting to really meld with the group, right? If your player is sort of inherently a little bit evil or neutral, or maybe kind of is on the fringe of society, how do you interact with your group? Is your group primarily good? Is there some give and take you can make with the group's choices? Is there some way that you can communicate, maybe in a certain situation, you'd rather do this than what the group would rather do? And I think it really I think the group kind of builds that as it goes along, right? You kind of find out the boundaries and find out how you can interact as a group, because what it comes down to is if you're playing with a party, the party's going to make decisions. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of about learning the other players that you're playing with and figuring out how you guys can coexist as maybe, a good player versus maybe a neutral evil or chaotic evil player. So it's about learning how to play with your group too, I think.
Well, we just had that happen. Chris and I play in a game once a month on Sundays, our Adventures in Middle-earth campaign. And nobody was evil, but Chris's character was driven by forces that often put the rest of the group at risk. And we just had like a 2-3 episode campaign that did not end well for several people in the group, mostly Chris. But we spent we spent a lot of time offline talking about everything. And then we worked that into the gameplay, where our last episode was just 100% all of us in character, hashing out the problems. Chris, your actions had consequences. And now, it's changed how his character is now and how his character is now going to approach the world moving forward. But we now feel like we now work better as a group. But it was very interesting because we were having those offline conversations that then turned into the online gameplay or the in-game gameplay.
Well, yeah, I mean, from a storytelling perspective, like I'm a method actor, so like when I'm a character, I'm a character. Like even if I'm DMing, I forget that I'm DMing and I'm that character, and people are like, so we gotta get back. Oh, I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta DM. I'm just really into it. So I was playing a Dunedain treasure hunter, so he's like a rogue. So like anything super evil, I'm going for it. Like that's my mentality. And we lost some players and everything else. I lost a hand, which is interesting. Adventures in Middle-earth is super raw if you've ever played the game. But looking back, it selfishly, I'm happy that it happened. So like realizing it as from a player's perspective and being completely selfish, like I'm going in. My friends followed me because they had that trust with me, like we're protecting you. And I had the bonehead moment of like, this is something evil, I'm diving in. I got myself and someone else almost killed, and then they brought us back and everything's fine. I think that was very good for my character arc from a story perspective, not necessarily a team building perspective, because that action essentially almost broke the campaign, because everyone was like, what the hell are you doing, yada yada yada, and I'm like, I was just playing to my character, so on and so on, and we were able to hash it out and communicate a lot over that month, and now we have a really strong bond, because it wasn't just my conflict, there were other conflicts too, where like, and again, it's a new group, we only meet once a month, it's hard to get that cohesion where we're just working as one group, and that moment, while it was terrible and selfish, brought us together. And that those are those real things that you interact with like someone does something stupid. I lost a hand, guys, so like I'm a rogue with one hand. I had to learn how to fight with my left hand, like, but it's, you know, it's these things that it's consequences, right? So no, now I can't shoot a bow. I'm a bow rogue, like I don't go up and stabby, I shoot. So like I can't even shoot a bow anymore, so like there's consequences, you know. But it's just the beauty of D&D, because it goes anywhere. It can literally take you anywhere, and it's about, you know, us telling these individual stories as a group and connecting, and then dealing with these conflicts, because conflict resolution is a big part of D&D, whether it's kicking down doors and dealing with guards and like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't steal every time, you know. And modern video games are kind of getting there, like Assassin's Creed, like if you steal something and you're around people, your little bar goes up a little bit, and you're like, God, I don't want to deal with a bounty hunter again. Like, so then you stop stealing, and then you start feeling for, like, it helps you with that immersion, where you're like, why am I stealing from these poor people? Like, you know, 10 drachmae from somebody because I just need 10 more drachmae. I have 65,000 drachmae, but I need 10 more. Like, then you're like, but then, you know, you start thinking about that. So, like, that's the beautiful part of just storytelling in general, is like, they're NPC game, like there's nothing connected to those people walking around, but you walk around this video game or D&D and you see these people, and now you start to resonate with them as real people. They're real people dealing with poverty, and they have pennies to their name. Like, I'm not going to go there and steal it. Like, I wish I could just throw, like the old Assassin's Creed games, you could throw a coin on the ground, and I love that. I'd be like, here, and I just start throwing coins on the ground, and then you just give money to the poor kind of thing. But anyway,
I think what you're talking about here, Chris, my audio video cut out there for a minute, but one of the things that I think is really interesting around this is looking at why people are choosing to do something as their characters.
Yeah.
And I think that is another way you can, as a game master, if the players are wanting to kill random characters at will, the reason why I do this in Skyrim is because I like to feel powerful and immortal. I pause the game, just go around to the towns and just kill everyone, clear out the town, and then I reload the game and do the missions I'm supposed to, right? It's just like this feeling of being awesome and powerful in just that split moment. And that's oftentimes why players want to get into the murder hobo mindset, is because it's about feeling powerful and knowing that your contribution matters. So when, as a game master, we see players start to just push boundaries like that, it may be because they feel like their story is on rails a little bit much, you know, and they need to try something and see that the world will respond to them. And so I think one of the things we can do as game masters when our players get real boundary testing is give them an opportunity where they can make a meaningful choice and then reflect on that back to them. So it's not always about the murder hoboing. Sometimes it's about feeling powerful or feeling like your presence matters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as psychologists, whenever we think about problematic behavior in the game, in real life, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what's the function of that behavior? And like Adam described, it was to feel powerful. Whereas another person may engage in the exact same behavior, and it was to feel safe. And so, like, understanding the why and the function of that behavior can really get at the root of how can we problem solve this and create a scenario where that is functional, or we can give you a replacement behavior to meet the same need. And we have this safe space to figure that out.
Yeah. So we have one more question. We're already at the hour, guys. Like, we could sit here and talk about this all day. So last question for the panel. Is there any way to start a chapter for my local VA?
Yes, contact me. If you are a veteran, It is a little bit more challenging, but you can contact me and you can start to talk to some of your mental health providers. And then if any of them are interested, I can help them get on board. If you are a mental health provider, it's easier because I can talk to you about how to talk to your administration about making time for this. But we've helped get a couple other groups started at a couple other VAs. I want this to keep going. So please reach out to me or Jared. You can schedule if you're a provider, you can schedule a consultation with Game to Grow.
We've also helped groups within the VA move outside of the VA.
Yeah, so like I'm no longer with the VA because I finished my training year and now I'm with Game to Grow full time. But like I have another provider that will be taking over my group at the VA, but my group also had an alumni group. And we've done this at most of the places we've had programs. So what that means is I have a therapeutic D&D group, and then when people start to graduate from that group, they start their own game, right? So they were meeting actually at a local base so that they could have both veterans and active duty involved in their campaign. And then they shifted to an online format when COVID hit. And so one of the things I love about this intervention is you not only get all of the benefits of the intervention, but you gain a new hobby, or you reestablish an old hobby, and it can be a great way to kind of get connected with people and moving forward.
Well, and then we also have like Matt, Wounded Warrior has the Discord channel now where veterans so if you are a veteran, check out the Discord channel for Wounded Warrior. We've got entire chats of like people are getting together and playing games together, and that's another way that vets are finding each other, and other people are able to come together and play together even during COVID, or maybe even especially because maybe remote is easier than doing it in person.
Yeah,
it is for a lot of people.
Yeah,
especially in rural communities where it's not easy to go to a game store.
Yes.
I will say
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just say a lot of VAs are obviously trying to do most of their mental health services online now, and they are looking for other groups that like work. This obviously works really well online. So if you are a veteran who wants this to be started at your local VA, I would encourage you to kind of reach out to, if you have a provider already established or other leadership there. They're pretty okay at listening to feedback from veterans, especially if you give them, hey, I want this group to happen, and here's a contact person who can help you get it started. It's entirely possible. I cannot speak for every VA. I've only been around a couple of them, but it's worth a try.
And if you've been to one, you've
been to one.
You've been to one.
But if you go ahead, Matt.
I'll say you'd be really surprised at the amount of veterans that play Dungeons and Dragons or might be interested in learning and playing Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, for our Discord, it only took one group getting started, and now there's a whole channel dedicated to tabletop and Dungeons and Dragons. So if you are interested in starting that, I would definitely welcome you to reach out and try to get something going, because I guarantee you'll find more veterans that are like-minded and that you'll enjoy interacting with and connecting.
And if you are a provider in some sort, be it educator, therapist, community member, Game to Grow is launching a formal training program. We have a consultation programs we run. We do 1 hour here and there with people, helping them set up their own program. So if you're interested in that, please go to our website. You can schedule a consultation there. There's a contact us form, or you can send an email to contact@gametogrow.org, and it will get to the proper person. We're a large, but not that large organization. We will make sure the email gets to the right person.
You can also just sign up for the mailing list. We also have webinars and other trainings that are appropriate for community members more broadly. Not all of them are just for therapists.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, this has been a real treat. It's the feedback and all the interaction and chat. There's a lot of community members out there that we have touched in one way or another today. Hopefully, if they haven't played Tabletop, they're playing Tabletop now. Or if they keep watching Fabled42 by the end of the weekend, they'll be like, we need to do this too. But I definitely would like to do this again, maybe a more longer form panel of some sort without the restrictions of a weekend. True.
Yeah, we've got UGDORCon coming up.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have my own convention in October. This is our second annual one, so we'll have a lot of events. So we could do a lot of different things, but I'm excited that this community keeps growing. We keep connecting with more like-minded individuals, and it's been a really awesome experience. So we're going to continue this Gen Con weekend. We have another stream in an hour at 4 p.m. Pacific. Quench Your Thirst are playing Deadwood with DM Joshua Blake, who's NPC Voices on Instagram. Thank you all so much for your support and conversation. Thank you guys for all of the input that you have given. I am super pumped right now, but I'm not playing D&D today, and I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
So,
and for those of you who have asked, you will be able to see this video on our Twitch VOD, which is twitch.tv/Fabled42. For those of you who are joining us from Gen Con, you can find everything on our Twitch page.
But without further ado, thank you all so much, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.